Well, so for those of you who don't know me, or maybe you do, I don't know, but I'm 54 and was, really my change happened when I was 21 and decided to go on a hitchhiking pilgrimage through Israel, and had left the week Israel invaded Lebanon, and all the Holy Land tours were canceled. The Summer War of 1982, you maybe remember that, Rich. It was called Operation Peace for Galilee. It was orchestrated at the Pentagon. We killed 60,000 people. And I hitchhiked through Israel, completely oblivious to everything, and spent a week camping out illegally at the Sea of Galilee, which was so beautiful and so exciting. There was nobody there, 1982. And I was really reading the Sermon on the Mount for the first time and visiting the Chapel of the Beatitudes. And it still shakes me. You know, I walked into that church, maybe you've been there, on the North Shore, that little hill, that little church. And I always say it was like graffiti as far as I was concerned. Written on the walls of the church. Can you imagine they did this? Blessed are the poor. Blessed are those who mourn. That doesn't sound good. Blessed are the meek, the gentle, the nonviolent. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those persecuted for working for justice. On the altar, love your enemies. And not being very bright, I thought to myself, oh my God, I think this guy's serious. And it was, you know, standing on the balcony, grappling with these texts, that I saw these jets swoop down from the sky, breaking the sound barrier, setting off all these sonic booms, flying over me in the Chapel of the Beatitudes and dropping bombs. And it changed my life. I got to see war at the Sea of Galilee, at the place where Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers and love your enemies. And like you, I decided, right, I'm going to try to get with the program. And I don't know how to do it, but with you, I'm on the journey. And that's what I find helpful, that living the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount and the way of nonviolence and peace, love, and compassion is a journey, and we're on it together toward a whole new world of peace. Where are you on the road to peace? When did your journey start? How have you been a victim of the culture of war through your life in our crazy country? And how have you turned and tried to become a person of nonviolence and peace? And as you look at the rest of your life, as I'm reflecting, I invite you to reflect on your own journey. With the short time we have left on earth, how can we go deeper into the life of nonviolence, the journey of peace? These are great questions. That led me, to sit at the feet of Daniel and Philip Berrigan, my friends and teachers. And it's just like a matter of days, I always say. If you're going to be with the Berrigans before you have to go and get arrested. And Phil was like, go get arrested at the Pentagon, kid, and report back to me. It was the way it was. And Dan, I was asking Dan the meaning of life. I was so nervous, 1982. Dan, what's the point of all this again? That's what I blurted out. And he said, oh, it was so helpful. All you have to do is make your story fit into the story of Jesus. And at first I thought, oh, that's so wonderful. I thought, oh my God. He could have said, go and end all wars and nuclear weapons. This is so much better, but maybe even harder and so much more liberating. I invite you to reflect on that. That led me to El Salvador to work with the Jesuits at the university, who sent me out to a refugee camp where the U.S. was bombing the area, and to greet the death squads when they came in, and to have known these great Jesuits, 6 of them who were later assassinated, changed my life. And that led me to walk onto the Seymour Johnson Air Force Base with Philip Berrigan in 1993. We walked right up to one of the F-15 nuclear fighter bombers, took out a hammer, and I went up to the side of it and hammered once on it like that. Didn't even chip the paint, but as I said to the judge later, Your Honor, I'm just doing what it says in the Bible. Someday, the Holy Prophet, Your Honor, someday, he said, someday these people are going to come along and they're going to beat their swords into plowshares and study war no more. And Jesus gave us that famous commandment, Your Honor. Love your enemies, don't nuke them. That's the actual translation from the original Greek. Yeah, that didn't go over well with the judge either. And we were put in jail, for Phil and I, for about 9 months, and Bruce and Lynn, little cell. We never left it. Never went outdoors, never exercised, nothing. It was horrible. Really, really, really terrible. Oh, there's so many stories to share. My trip to Iraq, my work at September 11th at Ground Zero as the coordinator for the Red Cross and the chaplains working with the relatives who lost loved ones, and our demonstrations against the war in Afghanistan, getting kicked out of New York and moving to New Mexico, the poorest state in the country, #1 in everything, including military spending, #1 in nuclear weapons. I was telling Mike from the radio show today, we think there's 500 nuclear weapons at the Albuquerque airport. And it's #1 in drunk driving, child hunger, suicide, domestic violence, alcoholism. The section in northern New Mexico, hands down the worst place in the United States, more murders than anywhere else, the center of all drugs. And right at the mountain is Los Alamos, birthplace of the bomb, where business is booming, where Obama is still trying to build this state-of-the-art plutonium bomb factory. He's done more for nuclear weapons than anybody since Reagan in 1983. We have our annual peace vigil there, and we put on sackcloth and sit in ashes and take over the whole town of Los Alamos every year in Hiroshima Day. Taking up the story of Jonah in the town of Nineveh from the Bible, to repent of the mortal sin of war and nuclear weapons, and beg the God of peace for the gift of nuclear disarmament, to try to take our work for peace public without judging and condemning, pointing fingers, because we're all in the same boat together, and say, this is not working. We need, and we're so poor and bankrupting and poisoning ourselves, and they're not making us safe. And so we're in the throes of that now. That hasn't gone over very well, but you do what you can. And so I come from that. Where I stay in New Mexico, I look out at Los Alamos. And we have, our other friends here tonight can tell you much more detail, some 15 to 20,000 nuclear weapons still on the planet. But there's 25 wars happening, with the US selling weapons to both sides. But there's 4 billion people in a subhuman extreme poverty. The UN says 1 billion people are starving to death. But we're in the throes of catastrophic climate change, our destruction of the earth. And we were talking this afternoon that the latest report saying within 20 or 30 years, we will force 40% of all creatures into extinction. Last week, the Congressional Record reported that over the next 30 years, the United States government has now committed in its budget to spend $1 trillion to upgrade its nuclear weapons and Trident submarines and weapons of mass destruction. This is insanity besides being unacceptable. It's a world of total violence. It's like we're living in some kind of zombie movie, or whether we're addicted to violence. But that imagery and that language doesn't even work, because it's structured and systemic and institutionalized, and it's holy, it's spiritual, it's the will of God, it's perfectly normal, it's totally legitimate, and it's meticulously legal. The first letter Thomas Merton wrote to Daniel Berg in 1960, look it up, it's incredible. He says, well, when they finally succeed at killing us and blowing up the planet, it'll be totally legal. You and I can't stand for this anymore. And we have to stand up publicly. How? Gandhi and King used this clumsy word nonviolence, and I want to reflect with you about it. And I keep inviting us to ponder, what does it mean? How do you define it? How are you doing on that journey of nonviolence in your life? I always say it begins with the vision of the heart, and that this is the key to the whole spiritual life, or just life, or all organized religion, or theology, or any spirituality. That we're all one. We're all reconciled. Every human being on the planet is your very sister and brother. The gift of peace was given millennia ago. And if you can enter into the spiritual truth of reality of our common unity, my sister, my brother, with every human being, you can never hurt anyone again, or much less kill someone, Or be silent and just go about your day to day when there's 25 wars, 15,000 nuclear weapons, 1 billion people starving, catastrophic climate change, and the whole litany of violence that you're all resisting. The prisoners here in town, to torture, racism, sexism, violence against children. So there's nothing passive about this. This is active love, pursuing the truth of our common unity, reconciling every human being, allowing the God of peace to disarm our hearts of the violence within us, that we can be instruments of God's disarming love, standing up publicly, like all our heroes from now on, and saying no and resisting these structures and institutions of mass murder. Practicing, this is so wonderful. Unconditional, non-retaliatory, all-inclusive, all-encompassing, sacrificial, universal love. We get to love everybody with one catch. There is no cause, however noble, for which you and I will ever again support the taking of a single human life. No, we just got to kill Hitler or Saddam or Osama. No. That's the boundary line of nonviolence. Nonviolence sets boundaries in this culture of violence, that we can then begin to discover what it means to be a human being, that we can discover what it means to love and practice universal love and boundless compassion and the peace of God. But it's in this addiction where you have to say no, and we have to do it as a people. So Gandhi says we're just beginning to figure it out. Well, I've been trying to struggle with this forever, and that's why I wrote this book with my friends at Pache Benny, helped me. And here's my take. This is the thesis of the book, The Nonviolent Life. And see what you think about this. I'm not sure you're going to agree with it, but just ponder this one. Nonviolence means 3 simultaneous attributes in our lives at the same time. First, real nonviolence to yourself. Really going to make peace with yourself. Cultivate interior nonviolence. Second, at the same time, we're going to practice meticulous interpersonal nonviolence to every human being on the planet and all creatures and all of creation. Third, at the same time, you have to have one foot in the global grassroots movement of nonviolence. Well, I can see that didn't go over too well. See, my thought is that we're good at one of those, or maybe 2 of those, but we don't want to do all 3. But Gandhi and Dorothy Day and Dr. King were trying to do all 3, and that's what Christ calls us to do in all the world's religions. Like, there's a lot of us, or some of us, a lot of church people who are really nice. Nice is not a strong point for me. 32 years of Jesuit education, I better not go there. You know, really peaceful to yourselves and your relatives, and not at all involved in the struggle. That's not the Christian way. It's not nonviolence. On the other hand, there's a lot of us who are really active, really engaged, really working for justice and peace. And we're mad and mean for peace. And it's not working. You know, we're full of junk and violence, and our relationships are not so good. So let me just say a word about that for a moment.